Hey there, this is Ray Salisbury from Nelson, New Zealand with my friend Barry Doig. He's also a seasoned landscape photographer. Hey, we're about to critique 16 images from New Zealand, from across the ditch in Aussie, from France, Singapore, India, and the US of A. It's not a competition, so we're not going to compare the images with each other. We're just here to help you with your photographic journey. And finally, it's worth mentioning that our comments are merely from our subjective perspective. Hang, everyone's entitled to my opinion. So let's get started, Barry.
Okay, let's go.
This first image is a field of lupins from the US of A. I'm really taken with the colour straight away. Just, wow, look at the colour there. The lupins provide foreground interest, something to lock our eye onto. All landscape images work if they've got something in the foreground and something in the background. That's just a sort of composition 101. So what do you think, Barry?
I love it. As you say, I like the foreground. I think you've made good use of your foreground. And in particular, I like the way the colours in the foreground stand out. That's a very nice picture. I just make the comment that it looks to me as if there's a bit of lens flare in the foreground there, which could be eliminated by using a contrast filter in your computer. But I think it's a very nice picture.
It's a bit compositionally weak, with the sun almost in the middle, you know. There's not too much to it. What would you...
Possible, and you could probably correct that just simply by a little bit of cropping on one side or the other, and that would sort of move the sun over. The middle sun doesn't bother me. More particular, I'm just concerned about a few artifacts around the edges there which you could take out, and the flare, the lens flare there. And possibly the horizon could be straightened a little bit too.
I didn't see that. And the other thing is the colour. I just have a feeling that this photographer's used an ND grad filter on the sky and it's left a colour cast. It looks unnatural. It looks like more of a magenta colour cast from the high-tech filters I used to have. Okay, let's move on to the next one. But before we do, what would you give this landscape out of 5, Barry?
I would probably give that a good 3 out of 5.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'd say 2.5 maybe. Okay, let's move on. Okay, this is clearly El Capitan from the Yosemite National Park in the US. I was quite taken with the monochromatic colour scheme, the subdued tones, the earthy sort of tones. I really like them. It looks like it's a slide from, you know, one of those the old film days, like it's a really old shot. And I love the layering. Like I said in my first comment, if you've got a foreground, a midground and a background, that gives a two-dimensional photograph the illusion of 3 dimensions. Just by the fact you've got different things in front of each other, it tricks the eye into thinking that this is actually 3 dimensions.
Yes, I like the way in which the foreground, you go from foreground to back to middle ground and then to the background to half dome there in the distance, and the half dome is slightly out of focus, which is good. It doesn't distract you. I feel there's a sort of again a sort of a haze over it. It's probably just in the scanning. I've been to El Capitan, but not at that height, and it's an amazing mountain. Somehow this empty space does bother me a little bit. I don't know what you can do about it. Some people might say, oh, that's making good use of negative space. I kind of think that you could move the camera over this way a bit and take out some of that empty space there.
We'll go on a cloudy day where there's more interest in the sky. When we zoom into the image, which is what we're going to do with some of these images, we can see clearly there's some big hairs and bits of dirt on the image, which makes me think it was a slide that was scanned in somehow. Or the front of the lens has got a lot of rubbish on it and it needs cleaning. Okay, what would you give this image out of 5?
Give it a 2 out of 5.
Yeah, I would say about 2. It's got a lot of potential, but it needs a lot of work to fix it up.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Next image is a tree and a train, also in America. What I like is the simplicity of the shot. Just a simple single tree, bang in the middle, that's quite good. I like the simplicity, all the air and space around the subject matter. That's actually good in my books. There's a single focal point. The eye is drawn straight to the tree. There's no mucking about. It's not cluttered, and that's actually good.
That's right. Yes. Now it could have a little more contrast, just to bring up the blue in the sky. Not too much, because you don't want to lose the dark in the tree. But I think it's a very pleasant picture.
Okay. Personally, I think the sky is a bit boring. They need like an ND grad filter, or even in Photoshop, you could put a gradient filter and just darken that sky. If the photographer had just a polarizer on the front of the lens, it would have been a darker blue sky. You would have had the white clouds popping just by using a polarizing filter.
Polarizing filter would have been good.
Yeah, I also think if you zoom in, you can actually see that the foreground's out of focus quite a lot. And really with landscapes, you want everything from foreground to background pin sharp.
Yes.
Really, there's no reason for that. So they're focused just on automatic, probably, on the tree, and not actually deliberately
That
focused.
doesn't bother me too much, because my eye is not attracted to the foreground, it's attracted to the tree.
True, but it is quite a boring foreground.
Yeah.
Perhaps a bit of cropping into a more narrow landscape, sort of panoramic frame would get rid of the boring foreground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Negative space is good, but not too much. What, out of 5?
Oh, I think it's a 3.
Really? Okay, no, I'd say only a 2.
You say 2.
Out of focus, pretty bland. Yeah, this fourth one is Sunrise at Avery Point. Really nice use of colour. It almost looks like a complementary colour scheme with blues versus orange, or purple versus yellow. Contrasting colours. That's good. Must be the art teacher in me. Shooting into the light, contre-jour, is tricky. And I think this person's done exceptionally well, or done lots of work, or used HDR or exposure bracketing to actually achieve this result.
Yes.
Is that obvious?
Yes, I think so. The first thing that I notice is that the photographer has used the slider, the brighten slider, lighten slider, and has tried to bring up the hills in the background. And as a result, you can see the artifacts across the top there. I think there wasn't enough detail to bring up. It looks a little bit artificial. It's because you've really tried to darken something where there's not a great deal of data there.
Do you think they have not bracketed it? They've just tried to lighten the shadows in Lightroom or Photoshop?
It looks a bit like that to me, yes. You can see the artifacts across the sky. Compositionally, I think it's a beautiful shot from composition. And now that you've brought it up a bit, I think that might be a better way. The horizontal format might have been a better composition. But I mean, I think the fact that the sun is off centre is good, and I love the reflections, and the reflection of the light on the water is just beautiful. And your foreground, it's in focus right through from foreground to background.
I think this person's done a lot of work, and they've got up early or stayed up late just to get the sun in a certain place. It would be really nice if the sun was just moved over a bit between the two masts, and then perhaps cropped, and if we could just get in a bit closer. Personally, I shoot a lot of vertical formats because they work really well on magazine covers and on pages in magazines, and I shoot for a magazine, and as a graphic designer involved in publishing, not enough people shoot vertically, and if you do, your shots can actually get published easier because they fit on a magazine page or cover a lot easier. So this is my suggestion. By cropping in a little bit tighter, we eliminate some of the superfluous negative space, and the masts of the yachts fill up the image a bit more, and you can see a lot more detail. And with this particular crop, you get the sun bang in the middle, but you're also using the rule of thirds somewhat with the horizon.
I think it's a 3. I think it's a lovely image. It just needs a few improvements to it.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost there really. I would say that one is at least 3.5. Okay, this next one is actually taken by someone traveling in Kenya, Africa. What strikes me first is just the emptiness of this vast wilderness. You know, it's really a cloudscape, isn't it? Rather than a landscape. It's really, because sort of 70% is sky, it's a cloudscape rather than a landscape. What do you think, Barry?
Well, it really struck me, this shot. I think it's a lovely image. My eye went straight to the road, and it went up to the end of that road there and up into the clouds and right out to the right. That was, to me, is a very pleasing composition. I would like to have seen those clouds coming up a little bit more to the left. You've clipped off a bit of the edge of the clouds, but sometimes you just have to deal with what you've got. If you move your camera around a wee bit, you might have got a bit more of that cloud. Exposure's great, and the composition is excellent, and I like the way you put the horizon right down the bottom of the picture so that we can get that cloud, and I think it's a lovely image. Yeah.
I'll comment about the colour. I think it's a good use of colour. It's what was in front of you, obviously, but you've got some secondary colours like blue and green and perhaps orange as well. So, yeah, which is colours of nature, I suppose. You also have got a symmetry there with the road is going off to the vanishing point right on the horizon line, which is 1 point perspective, and art teacher speak. Whether you realise that or not, that's good. I personally, I would have liked to get a more aerial view looking down on the road. So it's the horizon. If the horizon was on the rule of thirds, I think you'd get more of that lovely, rich earth colour, personally. For me, the clouds don't do much for me. What do you think out of 5?
I think it's a good 3.5 out of 5. I do.
I think it's quite nice. There's not too much wrong with it, but to me, I sort of still give it 2. 2.5. Okay. It's not that exciting for me.
We have a difference of opinion.
This is what I would do with it. I would make it crop the horizon on the rule of thirds and show the width of the scene more by doing a panoramic crop like this and get more earth in it. And then you've got a nice leading line from the left coming through. And it's because it's bigger, you see those things?
Now you've got a very different picture.
Yes.
Having done that little bit of cropping, you've got a very different picture, and it's much improved.
It's quite amazing what you can do with a simple crop.
Yeah.
Now this is clearly an iconic landmark from Aussie. It's the Sydney Opera House with its 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 different curved roofs symbolising the sails. In his email to me, he said he was attempting to get a sunstar or sunburst effect, you know, with the sun's rays bursting out through the roof of the Opera House. Obviously, he didn't get much.
That's right.
Much of a sunstar effect.
I think he needs to stop down to a lower F number.
E.g.?
E.g. F16, F22 perhaps, you know. I don't mind the reflection, the flare reflection, that doesn't bother me. I just think maybe you could crop a little bit of the sky off. There's a bit of waste space there, and maybe you could probably try your cropping and your
get a panoramic frame
effect. Yeah, the panoramic frame.
Oh, let's try that. If we crop it into a panoramic frame and get rid of some of that negative space in the sky, it means the foreground is actually bigger in the shot now, and we can see a bit more of it. And we've got a bit more rule of thirdsy sort of composition. Now the horizon's being in the middle, but it doesn't matter too much because the Opera House is totally blocking it. I think a lower viewpoint would have been better in future. So if you go back to this place, try and get lower down and get a really interesting skyline. What do you think out of 5?
I think it would be another 3.5 out of 5.
No, I'd say only a 2. The sunburst thing didn't work. You can't see the roof. There's a lot of wasted space at the top, and there's this horrible flare.
Okay.
Each to their own, whatever floats your boat. Okay, we've got another one from Aussie over the ditch. It's called the Coat Hanger. On the left here we see the Sydney Harbour Bridge, aka the Coat Hanger, and on the right we see a successful sunstar effect over the Opera House.
Yes, but it's just a bit too successful. It dominates the Opera House, and you can hardly see that it's the Opera House. And also feel that, although the title is the Coat Hanger, you can hardly see the Harbour Bridge. It's your angle. This straight-on angle doesn't suit a subject like the Harbour Bridge. You've really got to be able to see the girders of the bridge. So I feel that for various reasons, and it's also got some flare in it too, which you can take out, I know. but I just feel compositionally it does fall down a great deal. I think you're just in the wrong place to see it. And I wouldn't give that a very high mark at all, probably 2.
I personally think it's worth at least a 3. I mean, this person's got up or stayed up, you know, and got to that place specifically trying to not just get the Sunstar effect, but get it right over the Opera House. They've gone to a fair bit of effort to align the sun with this iconic Sydney landmark. There's a lot of boring sky. Obviously, we could crop it into a nice long panorama, which would make everything actually bigger or appear bigger. I love the sunburst effect. It doesn't bother me that it's over the Opera House at all. I think just cropping it real tight, getting rid of most of the sky, would solve that. The architecture's on a slant, so it needs some lens correction. And something else that really does need, Barry, to improve it is some post-production. If you get in here, you see a ton of dirt on the sensor, but particularly here, look at those terrible sensor spots. They're all over the lens. So, photographer, you need to get your sensor cleaned. What would you give it out of 5?
Well, I thought I would give it a 2. If you cropped it, I'd probably give it a muck and a bit higher. It would improve it, yes. If you cropped it, yes.
Like
it would make it up to about a 3, I think. Yes.
Yeah, I'd say about a 3.
Yes.
So, all is not lost. Bit of cropping, cleaning. Okay, what have we got now? And another photograph from across the ditch. This is a bridge in Brisbane at night. The photographer said that he was trying to avoid the cliche angle with the city skyline behind it, and he wanted to get around the other side of the bridge and get a different view. So that's always admirable, trying to be original. There's a nice lead-in line from the left. Several lead-in lines all coming into the bridge leading up, which is good, and some nice colour and reflections in the water. I think that's the most interesting part of it.
The thing about this kind of shot is that your meter will read for the dark background, and it will say there's not enough light, open up your lens, and it will overexpose. You have to compensate for that by underexposing considerably, at least 2 stops, maybe 3 stops.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Yeah, how much would you give this image?
I like the lead in, from the left to the right.
Yeah.
I think it has a considerable impact. I think I'd probably give that a 3.
I'd say 1.5.
1.5, 2.
Well, there's a lot of empty sky there. It needs a panoramic.
Perhaps you're right there.
The horizon's on an angle.
Maybe 2. Maybe 2. Yes. I'm a bit generous. I'm a generous sort of person.
At least someone is. Okay, another Aussie shot. This is Moondar Beach. Photographer again was striving to be original. Instead of getting all the colourful colours, they decided to change it to black and white. But personally, I miss the colours from beach shots. I think they make awesome objects.
Yeah, I think probably your subject matter here doesn't lend itself to black and white. To take a sky in black and white, you've got to have puffy clouds, and unless you can bring those clouds up, I'm not so sure that it's come off as a black and white. It would have been better as a colour image.
What would you give this image out of 5?
I would only give it a 2.
Yeah, I'd give it a 1.5. Yeah. Yeah, let's move on. Let's see what else we've got. Wow. Okay, this is a bridge in France. I think they call it a pont. I love the symmetry here. It's got horizontal symmetry with a mirror image, but also vertical symmetry. And the bridge is reflected that way as well. And I love the fact the water is so calm that even the reflection's sharp. I turned this image upside down and it looked even better. Yeah.
It really appeals to me.
Yep.
There's a lot of things I like about it. This is where the central composition is important. You don't need to worry about rule of thirds or anything like that. My eye goes straight into the centre of the picture. Also, to me, it's also it's a pity that you didn't move back a metre or 2 and just get in the top of the bridge.
So it looks a bit cropped, and I think the photographer would have done well just to move back a few feet and just get a bit more of the bridge in.
Yes, I think so.
It's not good when an element of your scene is really close to the photo frame creates tension.
Yes, yes.
You need space around everything. But I'm quite pleased with it. Golden hour lighting, the sharpness of it, the pretty good exposure. It's all there. I'd give it a good 3.5, 4.
Yes, I would too. I'd give it a 4.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I love the framing device. You know, the viewer's eye is locked in there and it just doesn't leave. It's got that sort of circle of infinity effect. Okay, here we have a double rainbow right all the way across the sky. Whoa. But what does it mean? Sorry, that's a viral video reference. It looks like someone's seen a wonderful double rainbow, come outside, grabbed their camera and snapped it. They've done well to actually get that saturated rainbow in that darker sky. How do you think they've done that?
I think so too. I think you may have used a polarizing filter to saturate the rainbow. That's how you saturate a rainbow, using a polarizer. And I like the fact that I like the second rainbow as well, and you can see the reverse colours in the second rainbow. I would prefer to you to have moved a little bit more to the left, to bring the tree, a little bit more into the centre of the picture. I also would like you to have spent a bit of time cloning out that wire across the bottom. You could do that. It'll take some time, but it does just, to me, it is a distracting element because it's a sort of a man-made element to what is in fact a natural subject. I know there's houses in the background, but you can hardly see them. I think if you could spend time cloning out that wire, that would be good. But it's a very nice image. To me, it's a good 3.5.
Yeah, I'll just give it a 2. It looks like a snapshot to me. They've done well to get the rainbow, but the actual tree looks bland and sort of boring to me. I think just an extra 5 minutes in the car or bike just down the road looking for a more interesting focal point, more interesting subject matter, even if it's just silhouetted like a church steeple or something there, the rainbow could frame something worthy of taking a photograph perhaps. Yeah. How about this for a cropping idea? A square frame gives more tranquility or a sense of calm or peace and rest because the width and the height of the frame are the same. It gives basically more balance to the shot. And by cutting out the second rainbow, less is more. You've got one rainbow, one tree. It's a bit more simple. Okay, well let's go from France to Mount Rainier in the US. This image really evokes all my experiences in the hills, and no doubt for you as a tramper and hiker. The horizon's bang in the middle. It gives a huge sense of sort of inverted symmetry with the mountain doing this and the valley below it doing the same. You know, so it actually works quite well. I love the saturated colours, the deep blue sky, obviously using a polarizing filter. There's no way you'd get that otherwise with the snow. I think they've nailed the exposure, and if we zoom in close, they've nailed the focus. Everything's pin sharp, so full marks there, technically.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely shot. I'd be pleased to have that on my wall. I would like you to have moved back a bit, or just lowered your camera a little bit, to get a little bit more of the valley at the bottom of the picture, really, if you could. But I still think it's a very nice picture.
It's a really good record of the mountain. It looked nice on Barry's wall, blown up big. I think it lacks the third dimension of photography. You know, photos have height and width, they're two-dimensional. That third dimension's missing, and that's mood. So possibly some golden hour lighting, the sun breaking the horizon, something to evoke a bit of mood. The other thing is, this is getting a bit pedantic, but if you do zoom up in the photo, Barry, you can see a lot of ugly sensor spots. Okay? Now they need removing with a healing brush in Photoshop or Lightroom. So you get rid of those sensor spots and you've got a nice image there. What would you give that, Barry?
Oh, I would give that a 4.
Yeah, I'd give that a 3.5, 4.
Yeah, I'd give it a 4.
Pretty solid image. From America we come to New Zealand here, down in the South Island. This is about 8 hours drive down to Lake Tekapo. I love the bright primary colours here and the bananas. Oh, the kayaks or canoes.
He likes bananas.
Yeah. I'm not sure with this image. It's got lovely colours. It looks like there's 2 images in one. One is the kayaks at the bottom, and then on top there's Lake Tekapo with the lovely sunset. It's sort of 2 different things. I'm not sure if they actually work together or not.
I don't mind the two. I don't see it as two images because the lovely sky is subdued. If it was bright, almost the same colours as the canoes, yes, you would have two images.
Yeah.
But I think the sky is sufficiently subdued to give it a unity that I like.
They're leading lines, aren't they?
They're real leading lines. Yes.
And in fact, at the bottom of the image, you get the kayaks or canoes as leading lines, all pointing to an invisible vanishing point just above the horizon. And in the sky, you get the clouds, the blurred clouds of the sunset, also leading down towards an invisible vanishing point. So you get wonderful symmetry and one point perspective. That really works well and draws your eye into somewhere across the lake. If we zoom in close, we'll just check it for the technical aspects here, like they would in a photo competition. Wow, pin sharp. Look at the lake, the ripples on the lake.
Oh yes, yes. Oh, that's great.
Try not to sharpen the sky, just sharpen the foreground if you are doing any sharpening in post. But otherwise, that's a really good solid image.
Yes,
maybe a 4.
It's a good image. Oh, it's 4. It's a 4 to me. It's a 4.
Yeah, yes. Pretty hard to fault that. Okay, let's move on. This image is a shot taken in India. This guy shot his wife on a bridge. And it looks like subdued lighting, perhaps a cloudy day. I like the dark background. It makes the human element really stand out well.
Yes. And I like it. I like it too. I think it's a lovely image because I like the texture. Because the light is so subdued, you put out the texture of the leaves, the texture of the brickwork, so the concrete works there in the background, and even the texture of the path. Excuse me. Just think I would like to have seen a little more of her face.
Yes.
A little more of her face. Okay. But the lighting is very good to me, and I think it's a very successful image.
I love the composition. Maybe it's the art teacher in me, but just the one-point perspective leading up to the vanishing point. In fact, leading up to her arms, which are more lead-in lines leading up to her face, which is lit up very well. So I don't know if it's a fluke or not, but this is a very good composition. It's really interesting. I would crop the top off slightly, just to the top of the grass on top of the concrete archway. It's a pity the body isn't, it's a pity the woman's face isn't and body isn't framed perfectly in the archway. By getting lower down, you would have achieved that. I like the cold colours with that warm pink scarf, the only warm colour there, and just wrap right round her head, which is the focal point. So well done there. Colours are good. Technically and compositionally, it's pretty good. Yeah.
I'd say I'd give it a 3.5.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So well done. Keep up the good work. Over there in India, we move back to the US to this lake. I don't know where it is. What's your first impressions with that, Barry?
My first impressions are that you've done something to the sky that just, to me, has not really come off. And I think you had a very good sky to work on there. I like your lighting. I like your exposure, but you've done something to that sky which to me has taken away from the natural feel of the image. If you're going to use these filters, then make sure that the whole picture is done in that way so that it becomes
consistent.
So that it's a totally abstract image. I think if you try to mix abstract with realism, you're going to get a conflict of interest, and that's what I think you've got here. You know, your real picture is in the middle. It's in the middle there, up to the horizon in the middle there. That's where your picture is.
I agree, Barry. I think what you could have done, in retrospect, is climb down a lot closer to the interesting parts of this composition. It would have improved the composition a lot. Instead of having the horizon bang in the middle, you could have been a lot closer to the water, and you would have had the shoreline leading through the lake towards the focal point. The 30 or 40 boats here in this modern marina, all these boats on the lake that you just can't see from a distance. So if you were a lot closer to them, they could have been the focal point, and you could have nailed a much better, more successful composition. And Barry's comment about the sky is right. If you're going to use filters, just be very subtle with them. Make sure everything still looks natural. Yeah, let's move on to the final image.
Did we give that a mark? Did we?
Yeah, the final image is from Singapore, but it looks like it's somewhere else in Asia. Might have been in Singapore somewhere, but I think it looks more like Malaysia or somewhere. But you've got the telltale rice paddies.
I think you need to crop off a fair bit off the left-hand side and a bit off the top, and maybe a bit off the right too, because your real point of interest is those two people standing on the right-hand side. That's that centre part of the image. That's the real picture to me.
So if we cropped it like this, and really got close to the action, that would improve it a bit just by cropping. Really, I think if the photographer had spent more time scouting and just trying to get the angle, the right angle, and simplifying everything, so you've got the two children wearing bright colours, which is great, contrast with everything else there. But you know, got them in the foreground, maybe reflected early morning when there's no wind. You would have got beautiful reflections in those terraced ponds. And then got the buildings behind them with the mist, adding that ethereal sort of atmosphere and mood. You could have got a stunning image here if you just scouted around and simplified things.
I noticed too that this picture, the eye starts at the right and goes through to the left. That's the Asian way of the traditional Asian way of seeing.
Of reading. They read from right to left on a page. Well, that's a fascinating point to end with. So we don't all read from left to right. Sometimes leading lines coming in from the right, like in this image. They do work. Depends where in the world you're from. Hey, thanks for listening. We've gone way over time. If you enjoyed this critique of your photos and have learned from it and want more, please subscribe. Hit the red button there. Subscribe to Hot Pixels Photography, and we'll do more of these for you. Please email me your best landscape image. Try and craft it well on the computer first. Get rid of the sensor spots, straighten the horizon. Do that work so we won't pick up those technical faults. Please subscribe to the channel and you'll get a notification message when we do our next critique. Adios, sayonara, and see you later.
And goodbye from him.
Yeah, cool.